What if a friend told you completely out of the blue that you would find your purpose, your vocation, living a life you never imagined in an institution you barely knew? That's exactly what happened to me nearly 25 years ago. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be sharing with you something I cherish so deeply, and it's how I found the purpose of my life in Opus Dei. I was raised in a Catholic home, and morning and night prayers were part of my family routine. Of course, rosary was included. My dad talked to God like he spoke to a friend, but prayer didn't resonate with me then. I had questions about life. I wanted freedom to travel, to explore, actually also to live a meaningful life, but definitely not something as radical as giving my whole life to God. Like most of my peers, I expected to be married one day after uni. Rather, and slowly, I began to realize that the life I never imagined was exactly the one I was made for. I had a passion for volleyball since I was 11, and I played even at the state level. I wanted to grow in that path, but my dreams were limited by the travel restrictions that existed in my home at the time, imposed really with good intentions. I first heard about Opus Dei during my freshman in the university. I was 19 years old at the time. My sister's roommate, who eventually became my friend, invited me to a study technique seminar. She belonged to Opus Dei. My sister, as it is typical in my culture, being older than me and actually the eldest of my siblings, assumed her role as my guardian, and she gave me some serious guidelines as to how to comport myself at the center. She said, "Do not allow anyone to confuse you to join them." Then I became confused. I was like, I don't understand. She continued, "There you will find a group of young girls who have refused to get married, and I have only sent you there to attend the study technique seminar and nothing else." At this stage, I became even more confused. I had questions to ask, but I couldn't get myself to form them. But anyway, we set out on our way. She accompanied me to the center because that was my first time. Of course, furnished with this kind of instruction, I got to the center very skeptical. In fact, I anticipated somebody approaching me, tell me, "Would you like to join us?" But of course, none of that happened. The atmosphere I met, warm, friendly, peaceful, clean, totally disarmed me. Before I knew it, I was at home. The oratory was especially inviting. It was so serene. And then I admired the facilitators who were so good looking. And I got my first shock when I realized that they were the famous women who refused to be married. You know, it's one thing to hear a story and yet another to add faces to it. And so my next emotion for them was that of pity, not understanding the richness of their vocation. I made friends, and some weeks after, I was able to attend my first weekend retreat, which opened my eyes to the message of Saint Josemaria, the founder of Opus Dei, which is that holiness and purpose are found in ordinary daily life and work. This concept blew my mind. Like, it was so new and hopeful for me because I had deeply desired holiness, or let's say, to go to heaven. But then I misunderstood holiness as having to go around on the street preaching, which I couldn't reconcile myself with because I am very shy. And so I thought that I couldn't be holy then. I mean, it wasn't for me. As part of my post-retreat target, I decided to start attending daily mass and a doctrinal class. But really, it was so short-lived. It didn't last a week, and so I gave up. By my second year, I changed city and soon forgot all about Opus Dei. After some months, I was able to renew contact with my Opus Dei friend in my first year. She was attending her annual course in my city. And after a long chat with her, I decided to attend my second long retreat. My devotion to Mary began unexpectedly. After the second long retreat, I became friends with another member of Opus Dei residing in my city. One day, she proposed to me that we went on a Marian pilgrimage. I had never heard about it and I didn't understand what it was about. So she explained to me that it was a visit to a Marian grotto, which involved praying the rosaries on the way to the place, making some penitential acts together with prayer intentions offered to God through Mary's intercession. The penitential act could be anything really you want to offer up, such as the comfort of going by car and rather going by foot, denying yourself the pleasure of snacking on the way or taking a drink in that journey, or any other thing you may want to offer up. At that time, I didn't have any existing relationship with Mary, despite the fact that in my family we prayed rosaries. We set out praying our rosaries. By the time we arrived at the grotto, I didn't expect what happened next. It was my friend's turn to pray, and she goes, "Mother, I have come accompanied by my friend, whom I want to present to you." At this stage, her voice trailed off because I freaked out on the inside. But something changed within me, and that moment became the seed of my mother-daughter bond with Mary. Soon after that, she proposed to me to start daily mass. And remembering my experience in my first attempt to attend daily masses, I asked my guardian angel for help. Later on, I learned the meditative prayer where I was able to discuss my affairs with Jesus like a real friend. Then too, I picked up the habit of reading a few pages of scripture book daily to nourish my growing friendship with God, and I became a lot happier. My friends noticed, to the extent that one day one of them commented to me saying, "You will soon join them," of course referring to Opus Dei people. And personally, I found it so far-fetched, and so I laughed it off because I had my dreams. And then one day, something unexpected happened. You know how a single sentence in a book can stop you in your tracks? I never knew God could speak to me personally about my purpose in life, least of all through a book. It was my first spiritual book, written by Salvatore Canals. It's called Jesus as Friend. I was on the third chapter, titled An Ideal for Your Life. I was still on the first paragraph. I had barely finished the second sentence when I heard this tiny voice within me. It was so subtle that I could have missed it, but yet it was clear. And it said, "I want you to join them." I was like, hmm? My heart started racing and I was covered with goosebumps. My response confirmed that I truly heard it, and I still remember the experience. In reply, I asked in disbelief, "Did you say I should join them?" And I knew the answer right away. Then I added, "But how?" Then came my endless list of why I couldn't and therefore shouldn't. All these were happening on the inside. The time for my spiritual reading was up, and I concluded to myself that I wasn't going to share that thought with anybody, calling it a random thought. But after some days, what was only a gentle inspiration became a gnawing thought, to the extent that I was beginning to be affected physically. Food became tasteless, I couldn't focus on anything, I couldn't study, I was just distracted. And so I had to talk to a friend, and then my spiritual director, and then my mom. My mom spoke to my dad. My parents promptly rejected the idea. My mom said, "Please don't join them. I have very few daughters." And my dad concurred. We are 2 girls and 5 boys in my family. And of course, it was understandable because they knew absolutely nothing about Opus Dei at the time and found it weird that I should want to become a celibate in an institution nobody knew about, rather than joining a known religious congregation. And so that chapter was closed, at least for them. As my problem remained unsolved, I suddenly decided to quit attending the formational activities at the center. At that time, I told no one my plan. My intention was just to go and never return, with the hope that the crisis would go away. I had also started finding meaning in the daily masses, and so I concluded that I will continue attending daily masses. The first mass I attended after this decision, I got to the mass. The reading was on Jonah. Jonah escaping from God and his mission. I was so uncomfortable throughout the mass. In order to recover, I took a break. I skipped mass the next day because I needed space, but I went the very next day after that one. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but the mass reading was still on Jonah. By this time, I was so broken and helpless that interiorly I cried to God for help, asking for some relief. The whole mass was already like a conversation between me and God, back and forth. At a point, I was aware when I said, "Okay, I accept." Then I added, but I'm really scared because I don't think I'm up to this task. At that stage in the Mass, I think it was the homily, but I don't recall if it was from the priest or in one of the readings that I heard this message. But it came to me and it says, "My grace is sufficient for you, and I'll be with you till the end." I had such deep relief, and slowly peace started returning to my soul. As I had made up my mind, I returned to the center. I don't think anyone ever took notice of my absence because it was really a short time. It was on a Monday at about 4 p.m. that I wrote my letter to the prelate of Opus Dei asking to be admitted as a numerary member. I was 20 years old and nobody spoke to me about joining them. God did Himself. Looking back now, I see the connecting dots and everything makes so much sense. He had always prepared me for this. It's not always easy, but it's real. And I wouldn't trade it because I couldn't be happier. And really, He has kept His promise. Have you ever felt God nudging you towards something you never imagined? I'd love to hear your story.